Y'all, we're back. Had to do a bit of a restart there. Our dog lost his mind, started barking a bunch. Here, it's gonna be a repeat. Sorry about that. We're listening to the Treasure Hunter G soundtrack. I'm kind of glad I started rambling. Glad about the restart. I rambled a little bit. Today's topic: a methodology for modular 3D environments. Very flowery language. It's kind of necessary though, because that's what it's about. It's a methodology. It's because you wouldn't say it's like a single technique. It's just like some important things to keep in mind. Some like it's a methodology. I mean, that's the word. That's why it's there. We got to use it. So let's look at some environments here. I'm really excited for this video. I'm excited because I've been struggling a lot. I'll put it this way. I wish someone could have explained to me 2 years ago why. 2 years ago, seriously, like, ugh, why this is important, how it's important. The just nonsense you'll run into if you don't do this doesn't mean that this isn't the only way to do it, or that maybe some of the ways I had been doing it are bad necessarily. It's just this covers your butt in so many ways, and just like it just opens a door. It's a foundation. It's like learning about anatomy. And again, this is just one way to do it. But let's get to it. So here's what I have. My old way of doing things. And I kind of knew about this. I knew some like good things about it. Or rather, I sensed it. I couldn't quite figure it out why it was important, how it can work. One of the reasons is because I was afraid of just smashing things together. Like right here. We'll actually get to this and how to improve this with little effort. And so this really deterred me. I'll say right off the bat, something that's going to come up a lot. If it's good enough for Final Fantasy 12, it's probably good enough for you. Good enough for us. I think that's just a gorgeous game. And this isn't Final Fantasy 12. It's actually a different game we'll get to. Turn down the music a little bit for me. They do it. I had, a few months ago, I was watching some YS, YS, is how it's spelled out, you'll see. That's a long-running series. They got a new one coming out on Steam. I think it's been out on PS4 for a bit. Maybe PS3. They do it. It's just, this methodology. It's really cool. And maybe it's common knowledge. I just wish it had been explained to me. So anyway, here's my old environments, right? How I did it. I have these pieces right here, right? Looking pretty cool. They tile kind of well. I have these like edges at the top. I have these alternate pieces. That's where I meant to go. They have a similar edge, so they can just tile side by side. I can do these windowed ones. Could throw these ones on here. I had to make new pieces for the corners, and they look pretty dope. Like, this isn't something, I don't necessarily have to not do this anymore. I have these corner pieces. Basically, I'll show you how to do it when we get into it. There's going to be some cool stuff we'll learn today. About some Blender techniques and stuff. This is just this edge here mirrored and cut at a bevel, so it creates a 45, or excuse me, it's at a 45 degree angle cut, and then you put those together and it makes a 90 degree cut, or, you know, turn. As things went along, I started running these things where, like, this doesn't, like, line up well. I'm trying to make everything just look super clean. I'm afraid of this, where I, like, you know, just smashing things together. But again, if we go to went to the wrong one there. Final Fantasy 12, which is a gorgeous game. They have like all these pillars, right? And they're just smashing stuff together, right? Sorry, I'm kind of like really dragging this out, but I want to sort of drive home. Sorry, we got a lot of stuff. I think it's this guy. He's taking up a lot of... I'll actually make this a bit smaller. The importance of this. So we're making these tiling things, you know, and I do a similar thing down here. I just have these simple tiles. They can tile just any way. And then I have these like edge tiles. And you'll still be doing stuff like this. Excuse me. We will understand here in a moment why this is so dope. So in my head, I'm like, okay, for each like tile, whether it's a floor tile or a wall tile, you know, I want them to sort of like line up. Let me do this. This makes sense. Oh, I thought it was on black. And I do what I can to sort of like line them up like this grid-based thing, right? I'm actually going to show this real quick. This is donjon.bin.sh. It's let's see, where is it? The actual generator. No, I don't want the code. So, you know, it creates these... This was how I thought I should do it. So, you know, each one of these blocks is like a space, right? And each wall is sort of a block. And I won't get into why this, like... This isn't necessarily bad, right? And so, like, each one of these walls here was kind of like a block. But my mistake is that I shouldn't think of them as discrete, like, blocks here. Do you know what I mean? Like, and then we say we have, like, a wall here. This is the mistake. Like, it seems weird. And it's not to say you can't do this. Right? We're building our walls necessarily like this. This methodology instead... Oh my god, I didn't mean to open that. Sorry. Just checking the chat. Takes a grid. What happened? Pop this in here. And instead focuses on the edges in a three-dimensional sense. So instead of our walls being sort of like this, you know, pushing away, I hope this comes through okay. But it's more about associating them with these edges, with the lines here. And then when we have intersecting points, like here, or here, and even along here, we create a new asset, like a pillar. And so that's what we're seeing like in this. We have this pillar here. Get that other shot here. We have all these pillars going along here. This is Final Fantasy 12. We have them lined up like this, sort of rotated 90 degrees. And so instead of like the asset, like the pillar asset, this is going to seem really abstract for a bit, being associated with the tile, like maybe like this, like a full tile, or like even like this, it's about that offset. It's about being on this single point here. It's going to be hard for it to show up there. But about being just like where those things intersect. So that's like the mindset. You'll have these other inner tiles that are your walls and your floors and things, but then you have this trim. You'll have your vertical trim, your horizontal trim, and then intersecting assets. And you can kind of, we'll get into like how we combine those to create really, really modular. And it's like, it's so simple. Like I lost my mind. Like I knew about it, and then I finally started implementing it, and then like all this other stuff happened where I'm like, I was wasting so much time. Like I can't even. It helps with railing and like different wall types. Like everything just comes together in a way. Like maybe this is obvious to a lot of you, but it's awesome. So we'll get to it. So let's go. Get to it. Let's look at Trails of Cold Steel. I was like watching the East games a lot, and I saw like what they were doing. It was real simple, like sort of 16-bit, methodology, really modular, real simple. And then you can do other things, ambient occlusion, lighting stuff, and they don't even do that too much. I mean, they got some lighting stuff going on here, but these aren't the best examples. This environment's cool, but it's not the best one. Where I came to the realization. So the realization happened. I mean, I was studying it too. It wasn't just like it popped up. I was like just looking around, and I was like, Trails of Cold Steel has a pretty simplistic but pretty style. I think this game's actually like super, super pretty. This is actually like a weak environment compared to like some of their others. So let's see. I'm trying to find a better shot. We'll do this one for now, I think. Sorry, I had it lined up, or, queued up, but I'm not seeing it now. Oh, now we're somewhere new. Dang it. I have it in the beginning here. Sorry. A hiccup here. That was an okay shot of it. Just gonna bring up the video. Big thank you to the RNGenius who was doing a Let's Play of this game, where I got a lot of this footage. He's real funny too. Like I came to love his vids, so I was glad that he had this here. So yeah, this is a better shot. We have this wall trim, right? And there's actually a good supplement picture here. Is that it? So we have that wall trim and like this floor trim, right? Like running along like the floor. When we get to like those ones we had before. I'm sorry, this is so slow at the moment. Like right here. So this is like where it drops off, right? This is where we have like a convex angle going vertically. And so what I realized is that this right here, these bricks to trim, are these bricks. And they're also these bricks here. That might seem like really simple, but I have to tell you like how awesome that is. So like right here on this pillar, so you'll create these pillars, right, for like your vertical trim. And then you'll have like your horizontal trim, just go in here, and it'll also be on the floor. It creates like a nice floor trim. When they cross, you'll have an additional asset that is like where those things intersect, and you can just like build it into your assets. So like what I did right here, you know, here's my pillar, my vertical trim, my horizontal trim, and it's sort of built in there. Like it looks at that and knows that like it needs to come out here, and lets you just have all this, lay things out. And I know that seems simple, but like I can't tell you how good that is. So the idea again is to think of it rather than each of your assets, like you're still going to do these assets that, you know, sort of lay out like this all lined up. The important thing is that for like this would be like your base building block. It's literally a block. You would also have this trim here. Like this. And that runs all along. Oops. You know, any edges that you have. Oops. Like that. That seems a little weird. If we go like this, it looks a lot better. And then let's say we this, go up like that. You notice that like oops. Oh, that's a bad example. I need to scoot it over. I didn't see. Now, if you look carefully, our actual tile, like you still have this grid in mind. And so you have the grid for like your walls, and then you have the grid for your trim. And your trim exists along the edges, right? And again, I keep saying again. These assets exist across both, if not 4 edges. So like right here, let's actually do this. This is the intersection point of like 4 tiles, right? And so it exists across here to create a nice bridging point, you know, a visual bridge between like all these assets so they look nice. Just gonna close this out and we'll go into like the quick sketch out example, and then we'll go through and build it and show you how like all this works. So this is a simple one, and I was like trying to figure it all out, right? So again, you have this horizontal trim like that exists on these blocks, like the block edges. So it's like the horizontal one. Like you still think in terms of like blocks. And then you, instead of a wall, we have like a rail here. And along the rail, you'll have like a new type of asset. So when you're building your pillars, you'll want to like, you can make a modular. And we'll get to it. Sorry, it's like a really long intro. But we will. I want to convey how important this is. Like, I wish someone had showed me this a long time ago. So let's go ahead and get it going. So this is like how you'll block it all out. So other good rules of thumb: power of 2, period. Do not do it any other way. So what does that mean? We want these all to be powers of 2, all of our assets in length and height and things like that. You can start to fudge a little bit with your trim stuff. But basically, I mean, you want things to be power of 2. So like these are 8 by 4, or excuse me, 16 by 4. Oh my God, 16 by 8. You know, our main like idea, really it's just 8 by 8. But with this methodology, you can, you know, have these wider tiles. And so here's where you can make exceptions, where you can fill things out right, with like these wall tiles. I should stop using this. Let's use like this. Oh my god, can't find it. The new ones. And you can fill things out like this. You could have, you know, some that are shrunk down like this. And then once you have that all set up, you can trim everything out. If you're familiar with loop cuts, that's kind of what you're doing, like to your whole environment. Excuse me, sorry. Again, I'm sick. So, you know, you control R, do loop cut. It just like slices through the whole thing, like in a certain direction. And so it's sort of the methodology. That way you have these blocks that can kind of be subdivided, and then you line them all up, and then you join them all together on the edges with these assets. So again, like the heroes here really are these vertical and horizontal trim assets. So we will go here to help us out in case we forget something. Go ahead and do Control D. Just going to duplicate that. Open that back up. So that was sketch wall A. And we're going to hide all these. Do this. Cursor to center. Shift A. Create a new plane. Okay. So we're going to call this sketch wall B. So we're getting started. We want to make a new environment. So we have our sketches, first of all. And there's going to be some general things that we follow. Again, you want to stick to powers of 2. You can scale it later in the game. You can also scale it, you know, on the import settings here. Oh, these are prefabs. Let's see. I'll just show you real quick. Import settings here. The model scale factor. The important thing is just like while you're working to keep powers of 2. So right, it's 2 by 2. So do SX4, and then do like SZ4. And again, what's nice about this is that we can create like, and what you'll want to do, if you see here, they have stuff that's 4 tiles high. Whoops. Stuff that's more 8 tiles high. Let's just consider like they're using our same like height. And then right here, you know, they have some tile right here. And so this lets you, and you're going to want to create assets that are, you know, those different heights. And then you can just trim it out to bring it all together. So we'll do this. It's 2 because I like that. Go ahead and save that. Go here real quick. Sketch wall B. This is our new one, right? Let's double check that size. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2. Oh, actually, we can do this. Z is 8. So it's 8 by 16. That's great. Make sure the pivot point in Blender. What I like to do actually. Excuse me, I'm real sorry. Let's do it on the edge here. And you'll notice this wall, for now, is right in the middle. So right now we're just kind of like sketching things out. Maybe we kind of have like our sketches like drawn out, and we're just kind of exploring what we want to do. In the end, your wall's probably going to be a little bit thicker. Like this, just a couple like that. But if you can, just keeping it centered right here is going to help a lot. When we create our trims, the thicker your wall is, you're going to want some thickness. I mean, it's kind of going to depend. But for sure, the thicker your wall is, the thicker your other assets are. You know, as much as I am praising this methodology here, they got some fat pillars. It's because their walls are thick. They want just like, it was easier to, and it's a stylistic thing too. But again, like if we look at Final Fantasy 12, I mean, they have some fat ones here, but they're not that big. And then here, you'll have alternates that, you know, are a lot thinner. You know, you can see right here where we have this angled panel, and it lets us bridge these two together. I was doing BS that was like, I mean, it looks nice, but it's, you know, I have this, right? And that looks cool. Like I have the angled edges, we go into the straight edges, but then when we're trying to like add railing and stuff, we run into all these nightmares where like, oh, where did it go? Where things aren't like, I'm just like slapping stuff on, like the railing is just like off by itself. So by lining it up again based on the edge, we avoid all these problems. Because these assets, these edge assets, are about just gluing it all together visually and structurally. So that's why it's so great. So we'll get back here. Do this. Sometimes it's nice to have it on the edge because, again, this edge is like our anchor point. So if we even did, for learning's sake, pull that out a little bit. Do like 2. Save it. Sorry, I'll try and mute it when I cough at you. So again, do pivot point here. Go like this. We're gonna remove component and then re-add component. And that's gonna update the mesh collider when we're running around. Control D, whoops. Slide it over, hold Control to keep it on the snaps. And if you need to change the snap settings, again, in here, just keep it power of 2 real strict. And then scale it later on the import or just in the scene. If you scale it, you will need to change your snap settings. So, do that. Go ahead. One of the reasons I like it this way is it's a lot easier to line it up. If the pivot point is in the middle, then you have to like go to the side first. I know that seems silly, but... And so, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. There's that gap there. That's because we're pushed forward. And again, that's why you have these edge assets, because it fixes all those problems. Instead of doing this nonsense where I was like, I mean, they look nice. Creating these like edge pieces here. I was doing it for the other corners, and it's just like, ugh. And then I do it like along here and up here, and it's like, oh my god. I didn't know any better. Like I thought, you know, you had to do something like that. So we have that going on. Duplicate that one. Again, you can hold Control to do that. To do the snaps, 6 is 90 degrees. So we have that. You know, I'm just blocking that in. Next, we want to create a pillar. So let's do Shift A, mesh plane. Name this edge pillar B. Go wrong here, rotate it, pull it up. Here's where it's the beginning of like needing everything to work together. Do grab Y. So if we look here, you know, we're behind this wall. First step is to get in front of it. Let's actually do this so we can see it. Grab Y. So we were 2, you know, 0.2 basically. So let's do 0.4 for now in front of it. We want this. We don't want this. This is an edge piece. It's about bridging these things together. So we'll go up like this. And actually gonna flip the normals because they were flipped. Generally, we're going to have a loop cut here because we'll just flip it. Mirror it, excuse me. Grab here, extrude. We only have to go this far. We will run into some problems immediately here, and I'll show you. But that's fine. We're here to learn about these problems and why they're good and bad in a way. Let's have a real simple pillar maybe. Let's make it a little fancier. Loop cut here. Excuse me. Loop cut here. Drag it all the way down here. That's not what I wanted, is it? No, let's do this. Let's think of something else. Do that. Grab these faces. Side view. Pull it on the Y. Do a snap. Again. Keep it to snaps as much as you can. You hold control just like in Unity. You know, that went 0.1 if I slid it along there. Do the same thing here. It's a pretty simple pillar situation. Do that. Grab these. Snap. We'll stick to... Let's do one. Let's actually do two on the top. So we got that. It's a simple pillar. Let's click on this. Control D. So we've duplicated it. We can go right in here. Sketch pillar B. Already updated it again. Remove component, add component to update the mesh collider. Sketch pillar. I'm gonna slide our light over. These are unlit at the moment. So the stuff's showing up a little bit better. Looks like I only pulled out one of those edges. I don't know what I did wrong there. Don't know how that happened, but whatevs. Got it fixed. So we'll have it along here. Could have it here. You know, if we did the perfectly just square based ones. But again, the idea is that we can have, you know, any size that we want. Our particular one is 16 wide at the moment, so we'll go 8 more. And we'll do another one right here. You may already be sensing some of the issue. You know, our wall's here, but this is like really wide, right? So here's where we will make it just a design decision. So firstly, we're going to duplicate it one more time. We're going to rotate it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So here's what we have. This is like the first issue. And this is why, depending on the design, you may want... This is for an implementation that's as few assets as possible. Again, if we glance at Final Fantasy XII, they have these thick ones here, but then they have these thin ones here. And in the end, creating a whole new pillar is way less work and way more empowering, you know, allowing you to create more variety in your environment than doing this nonsense that I was doing with these like edge pieces like here. Question at the moment? None. So, what do we want to do? We could go thinner. Scale X 0.5, Control S. And that's probably what we'll do for this one. The previous ones I go fatter. So we still have an issue right here. You know, we're not quite lined up. Like, we're getting some overlap that we don't want. So we're just gonna have to pull it out. My dog's making gross noises. So we'll grab these front. Grab Y. Let's try 2. It's looking pretty good. We already have this edge here. And it's hard to see, but there's some Z fighting on here. There's a bunch of different solutions for that. You can just create a new asset where you just have like some beveled ones. Again, it's where you do that 45-degree cut, and we'll get to that. Or, which I also recommend, like, I'll recommend both, like, it's just going to depend. What you do is instead make this you'll want this to be your pillar, and do V to rip edges. You can do L to do this new thing right here. We're going to bring it back down. Because again, it's about making a bridge between those two. And again, these bridges are like in 3-dimensional space. We want to consider bridging this up and down, you know, to all these tiles that may exist. And the point is that these are like kind of agnostic. Like, I mean, a little bit. Like, it doesn't really care what else is going on, but they kind of do. We'll get to it. Just like scale this out along the x-axis, like that. And that's a little tall. Let's bring it down. And save that. Forgot to do P, which is separate. We'll do it by selection because we had that selected already. Sketch, pillar, B, top, A, because we're going to have multiple. Again, it may seem like this is extra. I mean, it is extra work, but in the end, this is like very empowering. It's going to give you a lot of options. So we'll save that, close it out. Those all went away, right? So we're going to reselect all these. Control D. Click on here, put on the toppers. Move component, add component mesh collider. So first of all, our Z fighting is still happening. So one way to handle it, and I'm just giving you options here. This is how Trails in the Sky does it. This is how a lot of games do it. This is like an example we've shown. They make it, you know, these full-on just blocks that they slam in there. Get a better shot. Like right here. So we've seen this in those other shots right here. It's just this big old block. And so wherever the horizontal and the vertical trim meet each other, then they're going to have this big old block there. And that's just an option for you. Like, you don't even have to have it necessarily. But again, it covers all these edges. So it's important because it handles the edge of this, it handles the edge of this. It's going to handle the edge of the other trim. It's going to handle that on the top and other sides. So it's going to handle it for like 3 different sides. You know, if it was all this way, like we had walls along here, it's going to handle all that. So we'll go ahead and save that. We'll no longer need this other one. You can see this is off a little bit. So you're going to want to adjust it, you know, based on, you're going to make this more like square, basically. Do that. These aren't perfect, but it's going to give you a good idea. See? So now we have this. Looks good. It lines up perfectly in there. Got this going on here. So our next step generally, I mean, it depends. Like, you don't have to do it in an order or anything. But we need our vertical trim, or horizontal trim, excuse me. So we will go here, we're in object view, Shift A for add, mesh, plane. Please, there we go. Go here, rotate it up, grab, go up. So it's kind of hard to see, but we want it to be in front of the wall. Right here is our wall. Oh my gosh. Here's our wall, here's our pillar. The wall's right here, so we need to be in front of that. Whoops. Tab, there we go. So we'll just go one in front of it. Now here is going to be a stylistic thing. Generally the pillars are the max up front, right? So this one's out way farther. You could have a style where, let's actually just load that up. Your horizontal trim is in front of everything. But you'll run into some issues. We'll get to it. You'll have a few exceptions, which will hinder, like if you want just like a super easy implementation, then so already you can see that that went out farther, but these joining ones that I had on this particular asset is like really, so what you'd be looking at is like something like this, you know, where maybe the trim is in front of everything. That's going to be stylistic. Generally, you're going to want your pillars up front here. So again, we're making a horizontal trim. So we'll go up here. Now, like I mentioned before, the horizontal trim handles up here. Sorry. Just undoing that, so I had messed with that other asset. But it also handles the floor. You can see here, this asset right here handles the railing when it's a convex edge. It handles the floor trim when it's a concave edge, you know, thinking about the floor to the wall. And it handles the ceiling trim. It handles, you know, tall walls. It lets you, gosh, where is it? Losing my momentum here. Right here, see? You have that trim here where it handles a railing, but then it goes all the way around and lets you have like these taller walls. So if you want just like a simple, like singular asset, then you're going to want to consider all those. So like right here, we're going to do is go one above. So we're one tile above our wall here. Or it's actually 0.1. I'm going to extrude. You don't have to follow this perfectly, but the idea is all these assets are kind of mirrored in all directions. And not like strictly mirrored, but like they're a cube or they are, you know, mirrored in ways that are consequential, I guess. It's hard to explain. But. And generally we want it to be, when you're designing it, you're going to want it to be like the widest, well, not necessarily, but you might consider what your largest wall is going to be. And so in this case, it's the widest wall. For now, we'll just stick with 16. So now we have like a basic trim. Let's make it a little bit nicer. Do a loop cut here. Already run into an issue because I'm gonna have to do it on the backside too, but we'll fix it. Do another loop cut up here. Grab that face and just pull it out a bit. And it's pretty tall. I don't like that. Do Shift S, cursor to selected, scale Z. And then Shift D, rotate it around to duplicate it. So now we have that. And it's not actually showed up yet, so let's grab all these walls. Control D. I didn't label it correctly yet. Sketch horizontal trim B. Save it. Refresh the chat. If your question hasn't shown up, let me know. There aren't too many of you in here, I don't believe, but grab that. This trim here. It's the wrong one. Sketch or B. Get that. Grab that trim mat there. So we have that going on. And notice we still have the Z fighting here. I'm also gonna illustrate that. Whoops. So let's fix this first. Component, Magic Collider, Control D. I'm gonna go down 8, which is our, basic tile size. And it's hard to tell now. I'm actually just going to pull these over because explaining flooring is a little bit easier. Just to illustrate it better. Bad example. Get this lighter colored trim one. So you can see that same asset creates a little trim there for us. And like I mentioned before, we have some Z fighting up here, which we'll correct as well. Please. Why Unity? It's pretty weak trim. Maybe you want that for your style. Maybe you want more emphasis on this floor trim. You may also notice, again, all right, let's get to this. I keep avoiding it, or not avoiding it, but skipping over it. We have some Z fighting there. So we may want to just correct that. We could do like extrude, grab Z. Did something weird. Go up one, scale, Shift Z, and just bevel it in a little bit. So we have something more like this. Gets rid of that Z fighting, actually creates nice little toppers up here. And again, Trails Cold Steel does is they just keep that stuff, they let it fly like all over the place. So now we have a little bit going on down here as well. You can see that maybe the trim, or excuse me, the pillar comes out too far. I actually thought I made this come out farther than that, so I'm a little confused, but you can see now that maybe that isn't the case. So, because of the nature of this particular asset, do scale shift Z, so we're going to scale out in every direction but up and down. Because it's those big, like, all-encompassing sort of trim asset, we're going to go in all directions. So maybe that's a little bit ugly for you. You don't necessarily have to do that. But it's good to keep in mind, because when you're stacking these, you want it all to look nice. And maybe it looks okay here. So that lets us go up like this. And now have these assets here. And also to keep in mind is that they make assets that scale vertically a lot too. So that's why they have those big all fat shapes. They again is for. So it's like these final pillar pieces are always like the most like present. So they stick out the most. And whenever this pillar crosses the trim, then it has to get even bigger. And so that's what like this piece is. But for us, maybe we like this instead. It's a little bit thinner or whatever. Again, you can do things like this. Because our implementation is actually 8x8. And we can go smaller, honestly. Some of the trim may not look perfect. And so you'll want to scale it or just make another asset that's just a little bit smaller. The idea is to avoid, making exceptions. But honestly, like with this, we can keep that. Maybe that's okay, especially when we stack it up like this. But then we also have this to just like keep it a little bit sharper. But maybe up here we actually have the fat tile, and down here we have two like of the small like 8x8s, and then up here we have a 16x8. Maybe down here there's a door, or just for variety's sake, do something like this. This might seem super straightforward and obvious, but let me tell you the nightmares I went through. Like, and I'm serious. Like I spent, like I have to redo all my assets, but I don't care. And it's not necessarily redo. Like the textures I get to keep and the designs I get to keep. You just have to refactor them to fit this methodology. So we have that. Let me see here if I have that going on. And you don't have to keep it like, again, how they just make it so that all lines up perfectly. Of course, you can have your own floor trim. One of the problems you can run into if you don't make this trim symmetrical is, say we have this. Oops, I meant to grab the top too. Let's redo this. Is it lined up? Good. So we'll drop this down. 8. And I'm going to cheat a little. Duplicate this. Just make it. Go down 1, 2 more. Mini. When I rotated it, it got off center. Shoot. So it's a little bit off. That's not good. This asset wasn't meant to rotate in this direction, so gotta do a little bit of a correction there. So that looks better. Well, it still seems a little bit off. Oh, maybe not. Anyway, an issue can arise if, let's say this is asymmetrical. And again, it's not a big problem, but if you're trying to keep everything like super simple, that's something to keep in mind. Just pop that out a bunch. We'll see. Show you what I mean. And this is something I ran into a bunch, like why this is like so important. And so, like maybe this looks okay here, but I like this trim. Maybe it's like, oh, cool. It like goes over the floor tile a little bit more. That looks dope. And I want it flat on this side, right? Like I don't want it sticking out, but it's not gonna line up over here. And so you're gonna have like more exceptions. When you get into some weird configurations of like different blocks of different heights, like next to each other, it's just not gonna line up. So you're just going to want separate assets, or, it's just something to keep in mind, like why these things are like so symmetrical, like why we do it. Just see in here, don't want to. So that seems a little weird. I wonder if I tiled that incorrectly. Oh, I had it set to center. Gosh darn it. So keep that in mind. So anyway, you'd have this. And again, maybe right here, you're not loving that. You don't want to fatten that or whatever to make those all look good. And I'd like to mention, I like, when you consider making multiple pillars, like for your environment. And when you make a pillar, it's a bunch of stuff. You have the centerpiece, you have the base piece. You're also going to want, remember, consider each aspect of the pillar or the horizontal trim. It's like own separate entity. So like this pillar is actually the vertical trim of the walls. This one here is the vertical trim meeting with the floor. This one here is the vertical trim meeting with the horizontal trim. Let's bring our pillar up because we want some railing as well. So now you can see when you start to bring these up, like as you just mess around, all these like opportunities arise, right? Like it's just, you can see the potential and the possibility. You're welcome to keep it this way or do one more duplication. What I was getting to earlier, I interrupted myself, is that you can have big old pillars like this. You can have these front-facing ones that I like, but in the end, I'm probably going to have multiple, and then I'm going to have these more symmetrical all the way around, like perfectly square pillars that I can that have a little more functionality. They're a little more boring because they're just symmetrical all the way around, but they look nice. And again, you'll want to think of it like, so let's look at mine, because this is where I'm going to do next. I have my pillars here. I picked some big fat ones. That's just the style I wanted for this environment. I have my pillars there, and I have the railing here, and this all lines up real nice. Again, this is that capper piece where the vertical trim meets the horizontal trim, so that's going to be a new asset. But where we have the railing meeting the vertical trim, it doesn't look the best. Maybe that's okay for you. I can turn it to the side. That looks okay. If I just removed this and kept that side-facing one, or maybe rotated it like that, then that's okay, right? That's okay. But again, to maybe broaden things up a little bit, give you a little more variety, is to have, you take that same idea that when certain trims meet other things, like it's like a new asset. So you would have, let's say, that a plane. A separate thing for when the, please, it's loading, trim meets the rail, like the vertical trim meets the railing. Where did we go? So you'd have a new asset. So instead of having maybe this here, and again, similar to this capper piece here, we'd actually make the base its own separate module. And then you'd have prefabs that you build in Unity, depending on how modular you want it. And this may seem kind of complicated, but trust me, it's like, these are all like valuable pieces. You have to weigh like how much it brings to the table, right? So here, you know, again, we may want a separate one for when the trim, vertical trim, meets railing, but you may also want one for when vertical trim meets nothing. And so then you'd want something like this, right? Maybe something a little thinner that like looks good in an open space. And so again, we'll go ahead and pop up here. This is going to be real simple. I'm just going to make it big and fat. So I'm going to make it wider than the wall, but still thinner than that piece that it's going to rest on. But I also want it to be symmetrical. I want this one to be a pretty... It's another thing that I've come to realize, like, when I'm doing like railing pieces and stuff, like how much this would have helped me along the way. I did some dumb stuff for like trying to make it work. Like, a bunch of like just really like just so many exceptions for like, this is really high poly, doesn't need to be. Actually scale it out a little bit. Do that right? Looks a little whack, yo. Alright, redo. Seems really obvious now. So now we have sketch, rail pillar V, and save that. Let's normalize it, you know, bibbidi bop it down here. And now we have this thing that, you know, looks cool by itself. It also, again, this dude does so much work. It's about joining all that together. And so now we can do like a new railing as well. Sorry, saying and now like a million times, so go ahead and make fun of me for that. I'm actually gonna undo that. Let me just add a cube. Here's where you're going to want things to be like on 8s. So we have this new one that we just made, right? This dude, the rail base, the rail pillar base. It's too high, plus a little bit. Again, we want our stuff to be pretty, just like our wall pieces are like 8x8 or 16x8 powers of 2, we're going to want to stick to that. So when we make our new rail piece here, we're actually going to want it, you know, if you find that you're meeting this pillar here, let me rephrase this. Let's bring it all the way up. You can imagine what I mean. Let's say you had like a tall ceiling. Let's actually implement it first. You know, maybe we do it like lined up. There's a little bit of overlap there, but sketch rail pillar B. Did I name that already? Let's actually name this one pillar base B. Renaming stuff gets Unity mad, so keep that in mind. Oh, right, I named it that. So we have that. Go ahead and duplicate that. Have our actual railing here. And so let's say we tile this up by 8. You're either going to want another exception where, you know, because maybe that doesn't look good. That, you know, this is meant for the base where it meets the floor as well. Few ways to do it. 1, make it 8 tall instead of 6 tall. 2, scale it. Just be careful. Sometimes it might not line up very well, and it's going to get weird based on your pivot points and things. This isn't necessarily bad. You can get away with scaling. I was like really afraid of it at first. Although Unity supposedly gets mad if you scale on one axis, but maybe they fixed that, but maybe they didn't. Like, I've heard. Anyway, like it's slower. It's not very fast. Either make it longer, or you'll have one more asset here. Similar to this one, you know what I mean? But this is actually what you'll see a lot. Like here, you know, I have these pieces right here, and we see it shows in the sky here, where I have these blocks, and they're actually built up. You know, you'll want one that's 2 high, 4 high, 8 high. Again, you follow that strict thing of powers of 2, although we're cheating a little bit here by doing 6, but that's up to you. You know, the one that's more work is generally the nicer one, which means, you know, create more assets. You know, we'll have that like joining asset there. So you can see we can start to do this, bring these around. So now we have these new pillars, creates more variety. Again, this would look really cool maybe if we had like these tall ceilings. What is also nice about having, you know, more of these is that we can accommodate more sizes. So maybe we have this 8 tall room here, but maybe like on this balcony or whatever, we bring it up a bit. And we only go up 4. You'll see the Z fighting right here because we're going to want a 4 tile. That's something you're just that's going to be pretty standard. Like you're going to want multiple tiles, like wall sizes, because that's where a lot of the design is taking place with these big old panels, right? They take up the most space. And we'll have that. Bring that over. And then you're still going to want like a 4-piece, right? And so maybe that's okay then. You know, for like, if you have some way to accommodate a 6 tile high thing, if it's always going to have this or it's always going to have something else to like make the whole distance there. You know, the full 8 tiles high or whatever you need at the moment. Let's see, any questions at the moment? Nothing so far, I'm guessing. Trying to think if I'm missing anything. Just for fun's sake, I'm going to actually fatten that a bit. I wish my floor trim was a little bit taller, like a little more vertical presence. But that means I'm going to have to increase this too. Our capper piece. So again, the thicker you make other stuff, one thing, you gotta like thicken other things to accommodate that. So everything got a little bit fatter there. This is poking out a little bit more, and that looks nice. We're using this like capper piece to do the floor piece, but again, you can have an exception where, let's say, okay, if vertical piece meets the floor here, then maybe it's like something else. You know, we already have this base piece in mind here, or this bevel. Like ideally we would have this separate, just like our cap on the top was separate. But you may like the look of them stacked on each other like this. Right? You may think that looks cool. That's kind of hard to tell. So you may want like a floor piece that's not this one, right? Maybe this only looks good on the railing edges here. So you'll want one down here. It may sound complicated, or I keep mentioning all these exceptions, but it's way better than the literal nightmare I went through trying to make other implementations work. We've about covered it. I don't know. Else there is this. Oh yes. Okay. Let's talk about a few other things. Okay, good. Almost forgot some stuff. You have the floors, right? You're gonna want to follow like a similar thing where you have powers of 2. I think of them in terms of like, remember mine are 8x16. And so these are actually 3x3 because it's old. I was in the middle of updating it, and there was all this Z fighting, and it would have been hideous to look at, so I just got rid of it so you guys wouldn't see it. But I like to do like 4x4 or 8x8. You know, each one of these squares. This is actually 4 tiles, right? You can see each one of those in the end is like 4x4, but then these actual whole asset is like an 8x8 then. And then you have these trims here that you can lay in. You can, I hope to implement some UV stuff so that way I don't have to have separate versions where there is this shadow here. Right? Because that looks cool. And maybe you're fine with that. Maybe it doesn't look as good. Oh, it didn't finish saving. Right. What I plan on doing generally in my workflow is I have that. I haven't done it yet, but then I take this, go down, and then I have a version that isn't like shaded. In a real ideal world is that you would use some like UV coloring. You could even, you know, more advanced stuff that I don't know yet is, you know, updating that or baking that in rather in your scenes as they load, or at load time, like, you know, game load time. So let me show you an example. Again, going back to Final Fantasy 12, we have this floor here. We have this tile here. In another shot, it's one of my favorite environments, tutorial area of Final Fantasy 12. They join them together. It's a slightly different, it's more of that 16-bit like square methodology. Not square soft, but like just strict square grid. Where are you at? Close to it. Oh, there it is. Nice. You know, on this other shot was that hallway over here, and then it has a trim here. But then we also use a trim here. You can see that their trim is like two-sided. Again, it's pretty small. I actually have... I did some real deep digging. Is this not the right one? Oh man, I thought I had them in here. Well, that's a bummer. I'm sorry. Maybe I didn't save it. Well, shoot. Really? Hold on. I can't believe that I don't. Let me check one other place. Do I really not have it in here? Seems a little weird. Well, that's too bad. I swear like in this one. There's only like 3 layers on, well, 5 layers. Anyway, I did some texture ripping in Final Fantasy 12. And, you know, their textures look real similar to like that one that I had up earlier of mine. And I don't know for sure if they actually tile it out. I do like separate objects here, but you'll see other implementations where you have these big flat panels, like quads, and they're not necessarily quads, but they're just big grids of UVs, or excuse me, of vertices, and then you UV paint them to like color in like the trim. It's real similar, like if you've used RPG Maker. It's like that, but 3D. For these, you're going to have like corner pieces that you'll need to implement. This applies to some of those pillar things I mentioned too. Let's go ahead and duplicate this. So let's say, you know, we made our environment. This is actually that texture rip right there from Final Fantasy 12. This one here. I actually had this implemented before I was looking at that. I mean, checkerboards are ever present in Final Fantasy 12, so obviously there's some influence there, but I'm actually not using this in the game. I just had this as a little reference. Sorry, got defensive there. It's this thing called Knife Project in Blender. Go ahead and add. Cursor center, shift add, mesh, plane. Scale it up. Rotate it this way. Rotate it 45 degrees. Scale it up a bit more. Drag it down to here. If there's a way where you don't have to use a separate object, let me know. From what I understand, you have to do it this way. Tab back out. We're in object mode. Select your plane by right-clicking. Hold Shift. Select the asset you want to work with. Hit Tab. It's orange, so we know we're good. Hit space. Type in Knife Project. Hit Enter. Generally want to go and do cut through. It won't matter on this plane, but when we're doing like bigger assets, like those pillars and things, you're going to want cut through, so that way it projects all the way through. Again, this one's real simple, so actually we can just do both. Delete these. Delete these. Shift D. Rotate it around. Bring it back down. Oh, I forgot an important step. Scale X, -1. Flip normals. I don't have to rotate it again, sorry. So, now we have our concave edge. You know, like the walls are right here, so it's like a concave. And, oops, gosh. L, this is what I want. Shift D, scale X, -1. Flip normals, gotta do that. Rotate it out. G to grab, bring it in there. Now we have our convex edge. Again, the walls are right here. Like it's just gonna be a little wall right here. Like they go down here, and then extend outward. Similar to how Trails of Cold Steel has these like just a bunch of like symmetrical assets. You can get away with doing something more like where they're two-sided, right? That's hard to explain, but you saw it in the screenshot where the actual trim is like two-sided here. So you're not necessarily seeing the other side, and then they use like baked-in lighting to, you know, give you better environmental like type stuff, especially this HD remake. This one's a lot more straightforward with the tiles. You just line them up, right? Again, you can do some other stuff where maybe you have, there might even be stuff on the Unity Asset Store where you just have big old panels and you can UV paint on them. You can there's built-in terrain stuff in Unity where you do that. One of the benefits of that, I hope to do my own shader here, where it's similar to the standard shader. Actually, don't need it that fancy. I like the Legacy Specular shader. On top of that, I would have UV painting. You wouldn't necessarily go in and paint like in each scene, although you might. But you would paint like these shadow edges here, like this. Say this wasn't shaded, and then we would add like some black here, and then save it as a new asset. So that way we can just have one texture. And if we just update the unshaded texture, then everything updates. But what else is nice about the UV painting stuff is you can have multiple textures. Well, you have one texture, like literal texture file. But you would also have like shadow shapes. And so in the shader, you have multiple textures, and you either lerp between them or you just add them, combine them, multiply them, however, whatever blending looks good for you, to create more shadow shapes, to do stuff like, which I hope to do. Oh, I thought I had it. I don't know. Like Vagrant Story, there's like tons of shadow shapes everywhere. I texture them in a lot too. You can see these are all like smoky. And on top of that, this is getting out of the scope of this video, but you can have do I have them over here? I thought I had one. Projectors. But I'll get to that in another video. So basically, you just line these up. If you do that symmetrical thing, it's a lot easier to just throw them in your scene. You'll still have to have like these edge pieces. I really wish, I don't know where it went. I have to have it somewhere. Like, that's weird. Is it in here? Sorry. Oh my god, so many layers. No wonder this thing takes like 10 minutes to load. No, that's from something else. Thought I had some others. This is helpful, like if I could just show. So yeah, that one's from Final Fantasy. That's that hallway. That's just from something I found online that I thought was pretty. That one. I was just trying different stuff. Makes me mad. It's like weird that I wouldn't. Yeah, I don't know. Anyway, I just wanted to see how they have it laid out. If you look throughout Final Fantasy XII, they have this situation where they have that main texture, right? I mean, not necessarily like main, but like one main one, and then they have the trim right above it. So it's like they have this squared out like this, and then they have this trim here in the texture, this blue and gold one, like right above it, and it's symmetrical like up and down. And so I wonder if like I mean, I guess they must have to, just like us, how we split it right here. Like we didn't change our texture, right? We don't have a texture that looks like this. We use some UV tricks to cut through and just like bevel it and then rotate it. They do something similar. But I don't know how it's like implemented in their editor or whatever, or if they have strict tiles like we would. Another thing that the East games do, and the Trails of Cold Steel games do, is have diagonals. Like with their tiling. Please load. Boop, 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 boop. Oh my gosh. I have too much going on. Oh my god. Please load. I don't know why this isn't loading. There's a lot going on right now, so. Darn it. Anyway, what's nice about this implementation, hopefully this will load in the background. It allows for diagonals as well. We're talking vertical right here, right? So we can either do this. Oh, we'll show how to do that as well. Sorry, I have to blow my nose real quick. So let's say I have my, we'll do that first. Cool, loaded. Better shot. Their environments look so good and they're so like simple, right? Like, I don't know, I love it. Okay. See, it's like in the preview, it kept showing the diagonal. Anyway. It's not quite diagonals. But they do that same thing. You can see, you know, this is the same as this one in the backgrounds, and they just have these different panels. But they also have these diagonals. Actually didn't trim it out here. Probably because it's in the background. Wasn't necessarily necessary. Again, if you want to be able to do it like without trim, maybe your panels just have some trim on it already. Your wall then would need to be perfectly centered. Like this. Where'd you go? Why is it so easy to lose this? Can't really tell here, but if we took out our pillars, then we would see that these line up, and there's no Z-fighting or anything. That might seem obvious, but it's something to consider, because like with more complex, it's hard to explain why, but like here, like there's some depth to my wall. You're gonna find that maybe it's easier if this depth came from pushing this out first, or if you just went straight back. It kind of depends. You're running some issues where if you make it thicker, like if you pull this out and then, you know, go deep, honestly, you could still tile it. Like you would have some, no, you couldn't do that. Never mind. Again, that's where like the problems rise. But when they're thicker, you can have stuff like this, which I like, where all this trimming that you're making is actually building walls too. You know, we just have this right here, this horizontal trim, and then we have, you know, it's just this one with the wall part kind of taken out, and then now we have like some holes and stuff, some walls. Please give me a good example. Gosh darn it. Sorry. Alright, I'm over it. But, diagonals. So, let's load this up. Let's do the vertical one first, because they're nice. And, honestly, I need one for my game. Duplicate that. In object mode, because we're not centered, because these files start to get big, I have tons of assets, right? Shift S, cursor to active. So now the 3D cursor's here. Hit tab, go into edit mode. Select everything. I'm not joking. Control, Alt, Shift, S. And then Y to go vertical. And we're going to hold Control. And generally you're going to want one that's, you know, maybe you wouldn't do it on this asset because it's so wide. It starts to look really bad. You're going to want one that's like this. And one that's like this. So one that goes up 4 and one that goes up 8 in the span of, you know, however. And it's going to depend. Oh shoot, I closed those Final Fantasy ones. They sort of have some separate ones. These are a whole new textures. They may even be sort of flat. I'm guessing that this is just a rotated edge piece. That's what else is nice about all these like exceptional, like these pieces that sort of bridge everything together. Because we can do this. We could either bevel it up, like we're doing in this one, or just one. You can just rotate it. You'll see it doesn't quite reach. So here is a magic number you need to remember. Whoops, did not spell that right. Pythagoras' constant. And it is 1.414, I think. I thought it would... Last time I searched this, it showed up right away. Yeah, 1.414. And so let's do 1.414. This seems really huge. Seems way too... Oh, that's if we go with the full right angle. Darn it. So you're going to have to do some more math. Ah, that seems weird. Anyway, that's why that one comes up a lot. Because if we're doing like walls, like let's say we actually wanted this. Let's do this first because it matches. Whoops. So we want 3. And we want 1.414. You can see that made it line all the way up. So you do this. Control Y. Let's see. And that's another reason why I like having the pivot on the edges here. It's like it's easier to like understand it. We go right here. And it's like, oh my god. So you can either start scaling up a bunch of stuff, or you can make some new assets. So why do these need to be longer? You can get away with not doing that, right? You could instead do some of this. Is it one more? But as you know, this is all grid based. Say we're building out the rest of the environment in these grids or whatever. When we get to here, what's happening? This doesn't line up anymore. So you're going to need to accommodate that. It's a lot less work, if you just sort of have these assets that you can rotate. Honestly, this is like another huge reason why this edge implementation is dope. Here's another case where maybe you would either want new assets, or you could just simply rotate that, or do in between, do like 1.5. So there, it covers your seams. It lets you do so much. And maybe you don't mess with this one too much if you had like some stuff up here. It just kind of depends, but it gives you a lot of freedom. But anyway, why we do that 1.414 scaling is because we like this strict grid, right? So now everything all lines up. Just something to keep in mind. Something you'll have to decide for yourself. Either make new assets or just scale stuff out. I think it's okay to just scale stuff out. If you're using it a lot, I think it's okay to... I think I would recommend rather that you make new assets. The reason I wanted to show like these East games is that they have it on their flooring a lot. And it looks really nice. You can see it here. This is kind of weird. Like they have like a texture that's kind of not straight, so it's hard to see. But by having the standard trim plus like a diagonal, you can create some like nice shapes in your trim. Just that little touch can give you some change in your environment that looks really nice. You know, this doesn't have to be 16 wide. It could just be 2. You know, you have to make sure you're following you know, your grid lines. And that's another reason why the scaling is good, because once you start to get different sizes and stuff, and it's like, ugh. So rather than fighting it, you should, you know, follow those rules. So if you're going diagonal, you need to be longer. I had, let's see. Diagonal. Y. I thought I had some. Might have to like load another scene. I might not have made them prefabs. Okay, was it in this one? I really need to close these first. Being a pain. I have to move it all out of the way. It's a big scene. All right. Hopefully it's in here. I think it is. Yeah. So I made like these special pieces that are like diagonal, right? I'm learning that just like this is a bad implementation. This is some of the nonsense I was doing. Like it looks nice. But, and you'll see this in other games. You could do this, and this is fine. Like with the floor tiling, it's fine. But you can also get away with having like trim on your floor. And so whenever you want to do like a diagonal turn, you can just drop that in there. Anyway, what I was really trying to get to is like these diagonal pieces. So I have these trims that are, you know, it's like the normal trim. So I have this floor tile here, and I have this trim. And then with the combination of those, I have like some diagonal transitions, and they can do a lot. They look kind of wonky here, but if I drop them in, like that, it's kind of cool. And you can actually have some that maybe line up better, that actually go full diagonal. And I thought I had some, but I'm not seeing them in the scene right now. Just yet another thing to keep in mind that you could do for your floors. Do you want to discard changes? And then there. That's a little meandering. Sorry about that. It's maybe it's a separate topic, but I also like to mention like those arches and stuff. Hey Poochie, sorry, dog's getting lonely. His mom's not home. She just got a job, so he's at home alone a lot. Not a lot, just 2 days a week, right, buddy? But you still miss your mom. Sorry. Ricky, dude, come on. I'll catch you later. We're almost done. Stop. Sorry. So, some arches. Just a quick. You know, I used to, I'll still use these, I made these arch ceilings. I think they look really cool. And I used that similar technique that we did in here. Whoops, not that one. For the trims, when we made the convex tiles. When we made these tiles here. To make some cool like arch stuff. We have this. It looks really cool. It's a little more strict in size because of how the arches like connect and things. But it's pretty dope. And so the other day when I had this revelation of starting to try out this new implementation, I had this, just like an arched wall that I really liked. Unfortunately, it's like the texture's all lousy because I was just sketching it in there using some old textures, and it's like, oh, this looks good, and now I like it a lot, but let's redo the texture. So I was just laying this stuff out, and I was like, okay, let's make some bridges. Now my pillars, again, you might have something separate. Like this is our base pillar, but you may touch it up a bit. This just looks a little weird. It can look kind of cool too, but it looks a little weird. And so I took out the wall, and I wanted some arches. Started here. You can see with this horizontal trim, it's setting up a framework for us to build into. We can lay it out like this. We can just have some arches. These edge trims are a framework, and we know that we can just like lay in like so many different things. Anyway, just building this bridge and like having some fun. Pop some railing in there. This isn't ideal. I might have something a little bit nicer in there. And I had this one right here. I just thought it was fun to like run through. And I'm like, oh my god. These have been like such, like they look great, but they've been such like a pain. But I'm like, if I would have just made like an arch piece, then I can just have, let me show you. I can have this going along just like I normally do. It's the same piece. And then I can just have this, just like I have like our wall pieces. I can have these arch pieces to fill in. And so normally I wouldn't have this trim, I would have this. And so let's say I made this whole new asset, which I'm going to do shortly, is take this and then flesh it out like into an actual arch here. And then the arch angle is a little bit different, so I'm going to actually fix that, but for illustration's sake. But right, it's like we go like that, and then we have this, and it's the exact same like methodology. We're just like, did I move the wrong one? That's weird. Seems weird that it's not lining up. Like really weird. So like that, right? So it's the same thing. These aren't lined up perfectly, so sorry. But when you build it, you just like build these arches. And then you'd have, like similar to the wall, you just have like the arch, like the ceiling. This might seem like really minor, but it was just like, oh my god, like it was amazing to me. And you just fill those in. So when you're designing the assets, you design this, tile like this, and then you'd actually have like these ceiling pieces like this. But it also means that you have, like, you've already made all the things that you would need to have like an arch ceiling, and you can just create new assets. Like maybe this is too thin, and you create new assets that are like bigger, like this. So you have these like long arches. Like that, and they just fill in. Like you don't have to create all these like exception pieces to make everything fit. You can just start slamming stuff together and it all looks nice. Stuff like that. And whenever you design a new asset, it's it's just, I don't know. It's just hard to explain like why it's so helpful. Getting a little bit rambly. About a minute, hour 45. That about does it. I'm trying to think. I didn't actually go through and make the railing. Just be the same thing. Make it the same width. As your standard, 8 by 8 or whatever. And it would be 8 by just whatever height you'd like. Another thing that we didn't really go through is just creating the different sizes. This is more about the methodology. We might make a video where I plan on, like, maybe my next environment, doing that, stream that, and we'll have some more specifics on creating this stuff. That about does it. Just real quick, it's about these edges and creating these assets that accommodate all that. Again, I was afraid of just smashing stuff together. Thought it looked bad. And here, this is like a bad version of it. It's like, it looks okay, but if all this stuff was lined up like I would really want it, or like how this methodology allows, then things would line up real nicely, and you can just kind of just go for it. Like, again, when you start like just bringing out these trim pieces, it's like all of a sudden you have this whole new like dynamic to the environment. You can have this, without the railing. You have all these like things that you can do. You could even have this, on the floor. On your trim, you may want to accommodate that. You may want to have another one that sort of makes that look nicer. But that's why, the trim is nice. Like up here. Oh, it's a bad example. Let's see. Get rid of that. Then we have this trim here, and it all just works. Like, you just make sure you cover all the sides, like for the assets that need it. Especially these ones. It's good to have the top and bottom. And remember, it's about like the edges. So you have your panels and you have your edges. And then wherever edges and panels cross, you may have like different variations on them. And powers of 2, that you have different. I guess I never finished this. You just scale this up. Yeah, I guess we kind of did it. We'll do it in another video better, but basically Control-Alt-Shift-S is like a shear. That ought to do it. This might seem like really straightforward. Here's that, my thin pillar for where, the pillar was fat. Over here. Yeah, I'm rambling now. Let's wrap it up. I seem to wrap up a lot at this song. It's one of my favorite songs, so I'm pretty pleased with. Thank y'all for watching. If you have any questions, let me know. Keep this in mind if you're looking to do 3D modular environments. Another thing to keep in mind, if it's good enough for Final Fantasy 12, it's good enough for you. That's what I like to say. I don't want to say so strictly, but just goes a long way. I did want to real quick just show. I don't know. We'll get to it another time. Because it almost feels like I'm just starting to show off now, but you do that thing here where we shifted it. Oh, I closed that one. You just do that with all your assets, and then you have these, diagonal pieces. But like we also mentioned, is that we could do 1.414, something like this. So now we have that going on. These triangular pieces are going to be a problem. You're going to want to make them new assets probably. I like to do it because I think they look nice. But they can be kind of a pain. This is actually be covered by... Here's another reason why the shearing is better. Because if we just rotate and we have these assets that are like this, these aren't going to line up. But here's where, old me would run into that, and that's why I was like making new assets. You do this, and maybe all of a sudden, we don't have to worry about that anymore because we can just hide it. Maybe that seems a little sloppy, but again, Final Fantasy 12 did it. You may not like how this isn't straight up and down, so really maybe that's not great, right? That looks like wreckage rather than like an actual railing that was built. So that's why the shearing can be nice. Have the shearing here, and then you can go in and like unshear the vertical parts, and that's what I did here. So we have the sheared part here, so it's at the angle, and then at those vertical posts. Anyway, thanks for watching. Again, contact me if you have any questions. The support continues to be amazing from you all. Thanks again. One more time, keep this in mind. Like, it's about those edges, about the vertical trim or the pillars and the horizontal trim. There's a word for it. I forgot to look it up before the video. Thank you all for watching, and I'll catch you next time.